Peace, peace and blessings. Salam, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Fatima Dini, and I'm the Refugee Sponsorship Program Lead. I'm here with my colleagues, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Lena, you can go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lina Awad. I work with IslamicFamily as the Research and Programs Director. I'm happy to have you joining us today. Zaid?
Hi everyone, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Zaid Muftadi. I am the Refugee Sponsorship Program Assistant, and I'm also happy to be here for you guys today.
Hi everyone, my name is Mena Datsun. I am also the Refugee Sponsorship Program Assistant, and I'm super excited as well.
We would like to start our presentation with a prayer for the people and the land.
And who has revealed that he is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the most gracious, the most merciful. We thank God for his graciousness and mercy with us and those who have come before us, and ask that he bless this gathering and the land upon which this gathering is held. A land we recognize as the ancestral land of the indigenous people, the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwa, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others to whom we are bound by treaty, our shared humanity, and a sacred call to brotherhood, sisterhood, and civic duty. May God in his graciousness and mercy support us all in our work upon this land and with each other.
So a few housekeeping items before we start this presentation. First, we would like to remind you that we're all here to work together and to accomplish our mutual aim of supporting people in crisis. That has been said. As an association, we acknowledge that we have a limitation of the support that we can provide, and we're upfront with them. Our focus today will be on going through the sponsorship process and the eligibility requirement. If you have any questions, please use the YouTube live chat box on the right-hand side, and we will do our best to answer your questions at the end of this presentation. Impark, it's a program that it's a sponsorship management platform that we introduced in 2022, and this is the program that you will use to submit a sponsorship application. So where we are at right now, the Islamic Family application is now open, and you can access the application through our website at islamicfamily.ca/sponsorship. The application will close on February 6th. Please note that this is a strict deadline to allow the review committee to have a sufficient time to review the applications. So we want to talk about eligibility and who can apply through our program. First, we need a co-sponsor. So refugees cannot directly apply through our program. They need a co-sponsor to submit an application on their behalf. And the co-sponsors need to be living in Edmonton, as we are a local organization. And the co-sponsor also need to have the ability to undertake the settlement financial responsibilities. The refugees that they're sponsoring need to meet the criteria for conventional refugee abroad or country of asylum class. The person need to be living outside of their country of citizenship or habitual residence. The person also need to be not to be able to return to their country of citizenship or habitual residence. A person not be able to integrate with where they currently reside and have no other durable solutions, and have the ability to settle successfully in Canada. So there are a few changes that were made for 2024. And the main thing that we want to talk about is the new Immigration Refugee Citizenship Portal. That's a portal that was introduced where people will submit application. Previously, we used to submit RCC application via email, but that will not be the case. Islamic Family team will arrange training for accepted sponsors to navigate the RCC portal. We wanted to discuss the Islamic Family sponsorship process. So now we're at the first stage where applying and initiating the Islamic Family application via Impark. After that, your application will go through eligibility review just to make sure the sponsors are eligible and they're living in Edmonton and refugees are outside of their country of residence and habitual residence. After that, the application will go through a review committee. Staff and volunteers are not part of the review committee. This is an external committee. They will review your application and they will rank those applications. According to the allocation that we receive each year, we will accept the highly ranked applications. After that, we will provide financial coaching for the co-sponsors that are accepted, and we will also do the RCC portal training for co-sponsors. We will also request the sponsorship deposit to be made prior to submitting the RCC application, and we will use the IMPARC to navigate the pre- and post-arrival check-ins for refugees prior to their arrival and after they arrive. We often get a lot of questions about why my application was not accepted. I answered all the questions, although we're unable to provide specific information of why a specific application was declined. We decided to go through some of the questions and give you a little bit of feedback what we were looking for. So this is one of the questions. It says, what housing arrangements will be made for the refugee? And do you have a backup should your initial plan not work? Please explain. One example is I'm his brother. I will do everything for him. So the person who's reviewing your application that don't know anything about you, this doesn't give them a sufficient information of your plan. Another way to answer this question will be, before my brother arrives, I plan on renting 1-bedroom apartment for him in a building close to my house. I checked a few buildings already, and I have 3 options lined up, 1 building X and Y and Z. All are accessible through public transportation and cost ranges between $800 to $1,000, which is within the budget. If those options don't work, I have a spare bedroom in my home ready for him to use until we find a suitable alternative. This gives the person who's reviewing a little bit of feedback of what you plan and that the fact that you have a backup plan in place. Another example is, tell us about any previous experience you have with settlement. This person said, I lived in Edmonton for 15 years. I always help newcomers. Again, the person who's reviewing your application, it doesn't give them enough information of what settlement background do you have and how you're able to assist the refugee family. Another way to answer it, give a specific information. So this person said, I'm a Syrian and I have been living in Edmonton for 10 years. I've helped 3 refugee families resettle in Edmonton. I have helped them with the following tasks: drove them to appointment, helped register their children to school, helped them with Alberta health card application, etc. This gives a little bit of feedback and information for the person who's reviewing your application. This is as per this presentation, and please submit your questions and we'll do our best to answer them.
If you're able to, if you have any questions, you can send them in the YouTube chat, and we'll be answering those as we get them. We'll just give it a few minutes for anyone who wants to submit questions.
So one question we have is, can a sponsor submit multiple applications?
That's a really good question. Yes, absolutely. So every single application would be for 1 family unit. So mom, dad, kids, and anyone who's dependent on that family, but not necessarily part of the usual family definition. So that would constitute 1 application. You would have to submit multiples if you're trying to sponsor more people than just that 1 unit. We just encourage that if you are submitting multiple applications, make sure that you're reviewing your finances, making sure that you're able to support that many people financially, that you have the means to support their settlement in the event that both applications get accepted. But you absolutely are able to submit multiples.
Thank you, Lena. Another question is, how do we upload content to the new IRCC portal?
That's a good question. It's going to be a learning process with the IRCC portal, so it's new for this year. It's not something that we've worked with before. So the sponsors that would be accepted for this year would go through training with us. We'll arrange for training so that they're familiarized with the process, they understand how to use the portal, and how we will be using it. So that's a little bit later down the road. For now, you're still using the same system that you were using last year.
Another question here is, when does the money have to be deposited?
Very good question. So the money would be deposited once the application is accepted by IslamicFamily. So if you're approved for sponsorship through us, before your application is able to go out to the IRCC, that's when we would ask you to deposit the funds with us. You would be depositing the cost of 12 months of sponsorship with IslamicFamily. The money would remain with us and then would be given to the newcomers when they come in. It would be given to them in monthly sort of installments. With you, you would keep the startup costs. So the startup costs would remain in a bank account with you because that money would be spent before the newcomers come in. Everything else would be deposited with us and then would be given to them once they come in.
Another question was, do I have to pay this all at once?
Good question. So yes, you do have to pay the cost of the sponsorship all at once. So the amount gets deposited with us into a bank, like a trust account, and held in trust until the refugees come in. But we do require the full amount before we're able to submit the applications to the IRCC. So your application would not begin processing with the government until the full amount is deposited.
Thank you, Lena. Another question we had is, can you support siblings older than 18 years old?
You can, if you're sponsoring someone who's over the age of majority, and they're still dependent on the family unit that they're part of, so their mom and their dad, you could submit it as part of one application. What would happen is the two applications would be linked. So you could include them as one application when you're submitting for IslamicFamily. What happens when we send it out to the government is we would link the two applications together. So one would be for mom, dad, younger kids, and any older siblings that are still financially dependent, need the parents for anything else, they would be linked to that application. In that case, they're called de facto dependents. So you could still submit applications for them. It's just the understanding that those two would be processing separately, but connected.
Another question is, does IFSA help with sponsorship costs?
So for that, what we would encourage you to do is when you're submitting your sponsorship application, be honest and truthful about what your financial resources look like. And how much you're able to provide. There are several questions asking about that, so go into as much detail as possible of the amount that you have, how much you have saved up, how much you're able to bring into the sponsorship. Your application is assessed regardless of the finances, but that is a factor. So when a committee looks through the applications, they factor in your financial capabilities, your ability to support resettlement. Ultimately, if your application is accepted and ranked high and you do need some financial support, we're able to support some applications, but there are no guarantees in that area, and it does lower your chances of acceptance, unfortunately, if you don't have the full amount in place. So we do recommend that you put in the exact amounts that you're able to bring into the sponsorship. If you don't have the full means to support the sponsorship, explaining if anyone else is able to support you with it. And once all those details are provided, we're able to assess the application more holistically. Of course, it is a committee that's going through it, so make sure you're as detailed as possible because we don't have that information otherwise.
Okay, thank you, Lena. Another question we had is, can you pursue two pathways for sponsorship at the same time? For example, the Sudanese private PR's pathway and the private refugee sponsorship pathway.
That's a very good question. I'm actually not sure when it comes to emergency responses, so we could double check. I would ask that you email us that question at refugee@islamicfamily.ca, and we can have that email address in the chat so that you have access to it. Generally, if you have two applications being processed within the same stream, you would have to withdraw one of them. Whichever one goes in first, basically you would have to withdraw the other one. So what I would suggest, at least for our internal application, if you're submitting through the Sudanese stream and you're not sure how that's going to go, you could submit an application through us. And if that one works out, then you would withdraw our application. Because that is an emergency response, chances are that application would go through faster. So you can submit both for now and then eventually withdraw one of them.
Thank you, Lena. Also, another question we had is this program different from the 5-party sponsorship program? I believe that's mentioning Group of 5. And also, what's the time frame for the sponsorship program?
Really good question. So it is different from a Group of 5 sponsorship. Both are forms of private refugee sponsorship. The difference is for a Group of 5 sponsorship or a community sponsorship, the person you're sponsoring or the family that you're sponsoring need to have a refugee status determination, which is something that they get from the country and the government in the government in the country that they're in, or from the UNHCR. So it's a registration basically that certifies that they're refugees in the place that they're in. When you're sponsoring through us as a sponsorship agreement holder, you do not need that refugee status determination. You still have to meet the definition of what a refugee is. So if you look through the eligibility requirements that we went through earlier, those are also on our website and in the application. You'd have to meet all the eligibility requirements, but you don't need to have the refugee status determination. Now, if you do have a refugee status determination, we recommend going through the Group of 5 route or the community sponsorship route, because our application process is focused on people who have no other alternative. So start there if you have that refugee status determination. If you have any questions about it, the Refugee Sponsorship Training Program, or RSTP, has a lot of resources and training materials on that. That's the primary difference between the two. The amount that you would need for the sponsorship is still the same. With a Group of 5, you need 5 individuals to support the sponsorship. With our sponsorship, we work with one co-sponsor, but of course you could have others supporting you and helping out behind the scenes.
Thank you, Lena. Just another question is, what if the refugees do not have a passport? Do they need to be issued a passport in order to be eligible for sponsorship?
So not necessarily. The travel arrangements, once an application is accepted by the government, will depend on the area of the world that they're in and what the requirements are for exiting. That's something the visa office would coordinate with them when the time comes. If they're missing any of their travel documents, any passports, birth certificates, things like that, what would usually happen when we submit their application to the government, not this part of the application, but if they're approved and it's going out to the government, we would submit cover letters basically explaining why they're missing any important documents, why they don't have passports. So that could be part of that application process. It's not something that would prohibit them from being part of this program. It would just mean that their processing, when it comes time to travel, might look a little bit different.
Thank you, Lena. Another question is, can I sponsor family from Gaza?
We don't really have the answer to that right this second. What we would suggest doing is that you submit an application through us. So if you have someone who meets the eligibility requirements, so someone who has left Gaza and is now outside, and if they meet all the other eligibility requirements that are part of this program, you could submit an application for them. There is an emergency response right now, though, focused on people who are still in Gaza, who have family members in Canada, and they have not closed it yet. There are limited spots for that program. So if you have family members who would qualify for that program and they're still inside of Gaza, I would suggest starting there. If they've left, you can submit an application through us. We're still waiting on more information on what the eligibility would look like for this particular program for someone who is from Gaza and left Gaza. But for now, you're able to submit. And if you don't meet the eligibility requirements, or if we find that we're not able to accept applications through this route, then we would notify you that you're not eligible.
Thanks, Lena. Another question is, does IFSA help fill out applications?
Do not. So the application process, to make sure that it remains equitable for everyone and that everybody has equal access to it, we don't support anybody in completing the application or in filling out the questions. That's something that you have to do on your own. What we can help with is if you have any questions about the process overall. If one of the questions is not making sense, we would suggest asking either here today in the live, or if you'd like to join us in person, we will have another session and you can find all the details on our social media. That would be a good time to come and ask questions. But in terms of application completion, you would have to do that on your own.
Awesome. Another question is, does Islamic Family support Group of 5 applications, and in what capacity?
We don't right now. Group of 5 applications, like I said, the best resource would be the Refugee Sponsorship Training Program. At this time, we're not able to support any Group of 5 processing, but the Refugee Sponsorship Training Program is a really good resource. And you'll find a ton of information there. They do live sessions, they do training sessions, and they have certified trainers who are able to support and answer any questions that you might have.
Awesome. Just a couple more questions here. Is there any way to ensure my application is successful?
Of course, there are no guarantees on what a successful application would look like. We receive hundreds of applications every year, and we're only able to accept a handful of them. What I will say is, from the applications that we receive, the grand majority of them are eligible. So they're people who are eligible for sponsorship, but they end up receiving various rankings from the committee. What I would suggest doing is exactly like the examples that Fatima walked us through, be as detailed as possible, provide very comprehensive, complete responses to the questions, because that will make sure that we have all the information that we need. The committee has all the answers that they need. And that's probably the best way to ensure as much as possible success throughout the process, but we can't guarantee it.
The last question here, you've already answered, but do I need an RSD for the private sponsorship program?
Good question. So no, for the private sponsorship program through a sponsorship agreement holder, like Islamic Family, you do not. You do need it if you're sponsoring through a Group of 5 or a community sponsorship. So to sponsor through us, you don't need a refugee status determination, but you do need to meet all the definitions of what a refugee is. So either be a convention refugee or a country of asylum refugee, be outside of your home country that you left as a refugee, and be outside of your country of habitual residence as well. And there's the list is a little bit longer than that, but primarily you would have to meet those refugee definitions still, but without needing to have that document.
Thank you, Lena. Just another question we have is, who is part of the selection committee?
So the committee is completely independent. We do not allow any staff or volunteers from Islamic Family to be part of it, because we want to make sure that the process remains fair and equitable to everybody. It's independent individuals from the community with various degrees of expertise and knowledge around the refugee sponsorship process. And we want to make sure that they're coming from different vantage points when it comes to experience, because they're assessing the application from different lenses. Each application is reviewed by 2 committee members. And what we strive to make sure is the case is that there's very minor degrees of separation between the scores that both committee members give, so that we can make sure they're grading the applications in a way that's fair. That was all the questions that we received. Maybe we'll give it a few seconds, see if anything else comes in. And in the meantime, I do want to remind you that if there are any other questions, if you think of anything else after this session, you're welcome to join us for the in-person session coming up this weekend. Or if you prefer to send us something virtually, you can send us an email. The email address is refugee@islamicfamily.ca. And we'd be happy to answer your questions there as well.
Okay, Lena, we just got another question. It was, how much is the average deposit for a family of 5?
It's a good question. I don't have the number on me right off the top of my head. I can pull it up. The best way to calculate it is finding the RSTP calculator. And I will actually go through the calculation right now. So the family of 5, it will depend on who the 5 members of the family are, so what their ages are. If we assumed it was a family of 5 with 2 adults, so a couple of adults, not seniors, and then the 3 kids were all under the age of majority. So I'm going to pretend they're 10 years old, 5 years old, and 7 years old. The calculation for the minimum support would be about $28,584. That's the amount that you would deposit with IslamicFamily. In addition to that, there's $8,855, which is the startup amount, and that's the amount that remains with you. Again, this is a rough estimate just based on the random ages I put in. But the total amount will always depend on the individual's ages, what the composition of the family looks like, and if anybody has special needs or requirements, like if someone is pregnant, if someone has special dietary needs, they would receive a top-up in addition to that amount. So it just depends on the family's circumstances. If you look up the RSTP calculator, there are also links to it on our website. That's the best tool to help you figure out what the budgeting would have to look like.
Thank you, Lena. Just another question is, the refugee's parents are already living in Canada, but not in Edmonton. Can the refugee join his parents if the application is approved?
So for our applications purposes, we only work with sponsors who are based out of the Edmonton area. We are restricted in terms of geography to the area that we operate in. So we're only operational within the Edmonton area. What I would encourage you to do, if you have refugees or if you have family members who live elsewhere in Canada who want to sponsor refugees to come to them, is look into sponsorship agreement holders in your area. And that list is on the Government of Canada's website or the IRCC website. You're able to access a list of sponsorship agreement holders, and you can filter them based on the area that you're in. There are some sponsorship agreement holders that are national, so they operate on a national level and they can sponsor in different provinces. So just filter the list based on that and see what you're able to find. But for us, we are restricted to Edmonton. Give it a few seconds, see if there are any other questions. Or if anyone has a follow-up question to anything they asked. Okay, not seeing any additional questions. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and thank you for asking really insightful, really important questions. This live will also be posted on our page on YouTube, and you'll see it on social media as well. Again, if you do have any additional questions, please do join us this weekend. We'll have an in-person session at our offices downtown. And you can ask any questions that you have. We'll be going over this information again there as well. And if you prefer to ask us virtually or not come in person, you can also email us. The email is refugee@islamicfamily.ca. Thank you so much. It was great having you here tonight, and thank you for joining.